This season of Resilient Kid podcast is dedicated entirely to sex and relationships education. Over the coming episodes, we'll be talking about puberty, periods, consent, and sex. Honestly, accurately, and without the shame. This first episode and the 5 that follow are made for parents, carers, and educators. They are adult facing. There is no explicit content, but these are grown-up conversations, and that's intentional. Later in the season, we will be releasing a second set of episodes addressed directly to the young people. Each of those will carry a spoken age guidance at the very start, so you know exactly what is in it before you share them. If you're a young person who has found this episode, welcome, and please carry on listening if you want, but the episodes here are made specifically for you are coming, and they will speak to you more directly. So maybe watch out for those ones instead of this. Now, this one is for the grown-ups. Let's begin. I want to start with a confession. I work with young people and families for a living. I talk about difficult things every single day. Grief, trauma, anxiety, family breakdown. I walk into those conversations without flinching because I've been trained to, and because I believe deeply that the most important thing we can do for a child, irrespective of age, is refuse to look away from the hard stuff. And yet, when it came to this conversation, this particular one, I completely understand why parents freeze, why they change the subject, why they suddenly find the washing up absolutely fascinating the moment it comes up. Because this one is different, isn't it? This one is personal. This one lands somewhere in our own bodies, in our own memories, in the particular mixture of embarrassment, vulnerability, and the sheer, where do I even start with this topic, has carried for most of us since we were the ones who needed someone to have it with us. I'm talking about sex, about bodies, about puberty, about consent and growing up, and all the things that happen in between childhood and adulthood that nobody gave us a manual for. And now we're expected somehow, without any training, any preparation, or even a decent night's sleep, usually, to explain to our kids. So this season, we're going to do something a little bit different. This season, we're having the talk. Not in one episode, but over a whole season, carefully, honestly, one conversation at a time, for you and eventually directly to the young people in your life. I'm Ashley Costello, and this is the talk we never had. Why this season exists. Before I get into today's story, I want to tell you why we're doing this. Why now, and why a whole season. Here at the Resilient Kid, the Resilient Teen, we work with young people, their families and their schools every single day. And in that work, one thing comes up more consistently than almost anything else: the gap. The gap between what young people need to know about their bodies, their relationships, their safety, and what they are actually being told by parents who want to get it right but don't know where to start, by schools that are covering curriculum but not always covering the real stuff. And in that gap, young people are filling in the blanks themselves, from friends, from social media, from the internet, from pornography. That gap has consequences, and we see them every week. The research backs up what we see. The average age of first exposure to online pornography in the UK is estimated around 11 years old. The Sex Education Forum consistently finds young people feel underprepared for the reality of relationships and sex. The Ofsted Review of Sexual Abuse in Schools, published in 2021, found that sexual harassment of young people had become so normalised, many had stopped reporting it. This is not a scare story, it's a call to action, because the same research shows us that the problem also shows the solution. Young people who have ongoing, honest, age-appropriate conversations with trusted adults navigate adolescence with more confidence, more safety, and significantly fewer harms. The conversation is protective and proactive. The conversation's the thing. So, that is what this season is. 10 episodes, 2 tracks, one for you, the grown-ups, giving you the knowledge, the language and the courage to have these conversations at home, and one for the young people themselves, honest, direct, shame-free episodes they can listen to on their own or with you, or maybe you want to quietly point them towards when the moment is right. However, I strongly encourage you to listen together. This is the season we make that talk possible. Let's get into it. I want to tell you about a dad I'm going to call Pete. Pete is 42. He's funny, warm, completely devoted to his 2 kids, daughter of 13, son of 10. He coaches his son's football team on a Saturday morning. He knows every word of his daughter's favourite album of Taylor Swift's, even though he'll probably never admit it to her. He is, by any measure, a present, loving dad. Pete came to speak to me not because anything had gone wrong, but because something had gone right, in a way that really surprised him, and he wanted to make sense of it. His daughter had come home from school one afternoon and announced, very matter-of-factly, in only a way probably a 13-year-old can do, that a boy in her year had been pressurising a girl in her class to send photos, to send nudes. She used the right language, she named it clearly, she knew it was wrong, she knew what the girl should do, and she had already, without being asked, offered to sit with her friend while she told a trusted adult. Pete was stunned. Not by the situation, though that was probably alarming enough for a dad, but by his daughter, by her clarity, by the fact that she had the language, the framework and the confidence to act and support her friend. He said to me, "Where did she get that from? Because it wasn't from me. I've never talked to her about any of that." And I said, "I know, and that's what we need to talk about." Because here's the thing about Pete's daughter. She was one of the lucky ones. She had a good relationship and sex education at school. She'd had a brilliant form tutor who didn't skip the hard bits. And somewhere along the way, the information had landed and she'd used it. But Pete's son, he was 10. Coming up to the age where things start to happen, questions start to form, information starts to come from somewhere, whether that trusted adult provides it or not. And for Pete, for all of his warmth and his presence and Saturday morning football, and he had absolutely nowhere to start. No idea how he was going to start this conversation. He said to me, "I don't even know the right words, Ashley. My dad never talked to me about any of this. I just figured it out." Which I think I probably got it wrong for a long time before I got it right. And we laughed. But underneath that laugh is, I don't want that for him. I don't want that for my son. I just don't know how to do it differently. Pete's not unusual. In the 30 years I've been working with young people and their families, Pete is the rule, not the exception. The parents who sit across from me every day and say, "I want to do this differently, but I don't know how," they're everywhere. In every school I walk into, every family I work with, every room I speak with. Now, that kind of "I want to do it differently" cuts across almost every topic that we cover, but particularly here. The reason's not complicated. Most of us did not receive this conversation. We received silence, or we received embarrassment, or we received a single cringe-inducing afternoon at school where they separate the boys and girls, that used a diagram, clinical language, told us the biology, and maybe even told you the religious aspects if you were, like me, went to a Catholic or faith school. But nothing about the rest of it. Nothing really about the feelings or building a relationship, what healthy looks like, or what to do when something doesn't feel right. And we carry that silence forward, not because we want to, but it's because what we know. So this season is breaking that chain. Let's have a look at the research and why the silence isn't neutral. I'm going to stop Pete's story here for just a moment because I want to talk to you about what the research tells us about the cost of not having this conversation. So I think sometimes parents underestimate it. They think we'll figure it out, or school will do it, or most commonly they're too young, there's lots of time. And I understand all of those thoughts genuinely, but the evidence tells a different story. Let's start where young people are getting their information. Research by Brook, one of the UK's leading sexual health charities, consistently finds that a significant proportion of young people in the UK report that the internet is their primary source of information about sex and relationships. Not parents, not schools, the internet. Which means in many cases, pornography. I'm not telling you this to scare you. This is an open and honest conversation. You need to know what's happening with our young people. These sites are built for adult entertainment, not adolescent education. Sites that show sex without consent, without communication, without any of the things that make sex healthy and safe and mutual. The Sex Education Forum in the Young People's RSE, which is Relationship and Sex Education, poll found that many young people find their sex and relationships education, both at home and at school, leaves them unprepared for the realities they encounter. They want more. They want honesty, and they want someone to talk to them like a real person about real things. If we look at the Ofsted review in 2021, it published a review of sexual abuse in schools and colleges, and the findings were sobering. Sexual harassment amongst young people, including online, was found to be normalised in many school environments, and young people reported it was so common they didn't bother reporting it anymore. So routine, they'd stopped seeing it as something worth naming. How does something become normalised? Gradually, quietly, and in the absence of conversations that say, this is not okay. This is what okay looks like, and you have the right to name it when it isn't. That is what the silent cost. I'm going to bring in something from Dr. John Bancroft's research on human sexuality. Bancroft's one of the world's leading researchers in sexual development, and he makes a point that I want every parent to hear. Now, I know that some of you listen to the podcast, your children are very young, and you probably think, I don't need to listen to this because I've got years yet. I'm telling you now, so you're already pre-warned, pre-armed, and you can have this conversation without the embarrassment. All right, maybe a little bit of embarrassment. However, irrespective of the age of your child, even if you've got a teen and your teen is off at university, you can still have some of these conversations. It's never, ever too late. So let's get back to Bancroft's. He argues that shame around sexuality is not innate. That means we're not born with it. Children are not born with the embarrassment about their bodies or the developing sexuality. Shame is transmitted, it's learned, it's passed down through the exact kind of silence and discomfort and subject changing that well-meaning adults engage in every single day. When a child asks a question about bodies and the adult in the room goes red or changes the subject, the child does not learn nothing. They learn this is shameful, this is not something we talk about, this is a part of me that's too much, too embarrassing, too wrong to name out loud. And that lesson is learned early, repeated often, and follows them into adulthood, into their relationships, and into the sense of their own body and their right to say yes or no. And that's what I want. This is what I don't. The silence is never neutral. It teaches them something. The question is what? There is also the NSPCC's research on Talk PANTS campaign, which is a brilliant campaign, by the way. And you can go over to there. We'll put them in the show notes. All of this stuff we will put in the show notes for you. Their campaign is built on evidence on what protects children from abuse. My early career was spent, and I became a bit of an enigma because I worked with children, which was rare, but also I specialised by accident in sexual abuse. I was trained to do it, but because there wasn't many of us around, that became my kind of caseload a lot. And the NSPCC's campaign is just brilliant. So I will pop them for you to see in the show notes if you need it. Forearmed is forewarned. The research shows clearly children who have been given the language and permission to talk about their bodies, who know the correct anatomical names, who've been told their body belongs to them, are significantly better equipped to recognise and report abuse to those who haven't. Language is protection. I have known a young person who knew the correct, I'm pausing because I'm trying to make sure there's no identifying features in this case, but I have known a young person that knew they were very young, they knew the correct names for their genitals, and that put off somebody who was going to abuse them. You might ask yourself why. But actually, if that is reported, there is no mistakes. The authorities, the police, the teachers, the trusted adult will believe them because they know exactly what they're talking about. And I think that saved that young person. Language is protection. The conversation's not just about sex education, it's about safeguarding, about giving our children the words they need to tell us when something's wrong. And that conversation starts earlier than most parents think, much earlier. So, how to start even when you don't know where to begin? Let's give you some top tips. I'm not going to leave you with the research and no practical path forward. That's not how we do things here. So, here are 5 ways to start, even if you feel completely unprepared. 1. Start before you're ready. There is no perfect moment. There's no age at which conversations become easy. They just don't. The parents I see who do this well aren't the ones who waited till they felt confident. They're the ones who started that conversation, opened the conversation, awkwardly, imperfectly, a little bit red in the face, and kept going. Starting is the thing. The rest will follow. 2. Use the correct words from the beginning. Brace yourselves. Penis, vulva, vagina, testicles. I know it feels strange, but research by the NSPCC and others absolutely clear. Children who know the correct anatomical names for their body parts have better safeguarding outcomes, and they are more able to report concerns. They carry less shame. The awkwardness you feel in saying those words out loud, that belongs to you. It doesn't belong to them. They will follow your lead. And what I will say to you is, how fantastic would it be if our kids are the first generation who break that stigma? If our kids and their kids say the anatomical correct names for their body parts without an embarrassment. That it just becomes the norm. It is in other countries. In the UK, not so much. 3, normalise the conversation by having it often and lightly. The talk is not one big terrifying conversation, it's hundreds of small ones. The best sex and relationships education happen in car journeys, breakfast tables, during the adverts, small, casual, ongoing. Did anything come up in school about that today? Or I read something interesting? Or I listened to this podcast? Keep that channel open, because it matters far more than getting any single conversation perfectly right. 4, tell them what you didn't get. This is surprisingly powerful. Nobody talked to me about this when I was your age, and I think that was a shame. So I'm trying to do it differently. Young people respond to honesty, to vulnerability, to the parent who says, I'm doing my best with something I was never shown how to do. It doesn't undermine your authority, it builds trust. And we know that from research. 5, knowing what's coming in this season and use it. Over the next several weeks, we're going to cover all of it. Puberty for boys, puberty for girls, periods, consent, sex, the whole thing. For you as parents, and in a separate set of episodes directly for the young people. Your young people. You can listen first. You can share the episodes. You can use them as a starting point for your own conversation. And that's exactly what they're there for. You don't have to do this alone. That's the point. Okay, let's get back to Pete's story. We spent a few sessions talking through what had held him back, and what emerged slowly, as it always does when you start to really look at this kind of thing, was a picture that will be familiar to you lot. Pete had grown up in a house where bodies were not discussed, where the word sex was not spoken at a dinner table or anywhere else, where puberty had happened without a single conversation to accompany it. Just a body that was changing in bewildering and occasionally mortifying ways, in the total absence of any adult who acknowledged that this was happening. He hadn't thought about how much that had cost him until he sat chatting with me, trying to figure out how to talk to his 10-year-old son. I didn't have the words, so how do I give him the words I never had? You'll find them, you'll look them up, you'll practice them saying them out loud in your car before you get home. And you'll say, I want to talk to you about something, and I might be awkward, and that's okay. It just means this is important. He looked at me like that was a genuinely new idea. You can just say that. You can just say that. Yes, Pete, you can just say that. A few weeks later, Pete came back to me and told me about a conversation he'd started with his son on the way home from football. Turned the radio down and just started, awkwardly, with a slight wrong word in the middle that made his son giggle, which actually, he said, made the whole thing easier. Less like a lecture, more like two people trying to figure something out together. He didn't cover everything. He hadn't covered most of it, he said, but he'd opened the door, and his son, at 10, had walked through it with the ease that children always will, if adults make it safe to do so. On the way into the house, his son had said, Dad, can we talk more about that stuff sometime? And Pete had said he had to sit in the car for a minute before he went inside. Nobody had ever asked that, he said, not once. And he just asked it, as if it was easy. That is what happens when we open the door. Children walk through it. They have been waiting for us to open that door, and they need to know it's safe. Let's have a look at the bigger picture, because I want to zoom out for a moment and talk why this feels so important to me personally. We are living through a period in which young people's access to sexual content, online, unsolicited, often extreme, is unprecedented. The average age of the first exposure to online pornography here in the UK is estimated at 11 years old. 11. Before most parents have even had a single conversation, before most schools have covered more than basic biology. And the research is clear on what is early, unsupported exposure does. It shapes expectations. It normalises behaviours that are not normal, and it teaches, in the absence of anything else to counter it, that sex is something that happens to people rather than with them. That bodies are objects, that consent is an afterthought. The antidote to that is not more restriction, though appropriate restrictions absolutely matter. The antidote is information, language, relationship. A trusted adult who says, let me tell you what healthy looks like, so that when you encounter something that isn't, you will know. The Internet Watch Foundation, which works to remove sexual abuse material from the internet is clear on its guidance. The most protective thing you can do is talk, not block, and hope, talk. The PSHE Association, which supports schools in delivering personal, social and health education, has published a guidance making exactly the same point. The young people who navigate adolescence with the most confidence and the few harms are the ones who have ongoing, age-appropriate conversations with trusted adults about their bodies, relationships and sex, not one conversation, ongoing. This is not about being a cool parent. It's not about oversharing, removing mystery, or having conversations your child does not need. It's about being the adult in the room, the one who names things, the one who makes it safe to ask. This is what Pete became for his son on the way home from a football match. Not an expert, not a textbook, just an adult who was willing to start. Okay, let me end this first episode by telling you exactly what's coming and what this season is for. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about puberty, what's happening in boys' bodies, what they need to hear about it, and the same for girls. We're going to be talking about periods. We've got a very special guest who has written a book, and I cannot wait to share it with you. And we're going to talk about consent. What is it? When we start teaching it, and why starting at 3 is not too early. I know, 3. And we're going to talk about sex honestly, accurately, and without shame. If you are listening to that and feel yourself burning up, feel yourself getting awkward or uncomfortable, these episodes are for you. The grown-ups. It's designed to give you the knowledge and the language and the confidence to have these conversations in your own home. And then, the second half of the season, we're going to do something different than we have before. We're going to make a set of episodes that are addressed directly to young people, shorter, different in tone, like a trusted older voice speaking directly. We will put age-appropriate warnings on. Those episodes are safe for you to share, to play on a car journey, to leave quietly on the phone. I thought you might like this. Each one, spoken age guidance at the start so you'll know before you share it. Because the goal of all this, every episode, every conversation, is the same thing it always hear at The Resilient Kid. To make sure no young person has to figure this out alone. Pete's son asked if they could talk about it again. That's the thing. That's the whole thing for me. That's what we're trying to build. Not a perfect conversation, but an open door. This season, we are going to open that door together. Thank you for being here for this special season. If this one landed, please share it with a parent, a carer, teacher, anyone who is standing at that door and not quite sure how to open it. All the research, references and resources, further reading if you want it, are in the show notes below. And if you want to know when the next episode lands, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a thing. It's usually a Thursday. Until next time, take a breath. We've got you. We're going to walk this one together.